Merida. I work as a content developer. We develop videos, infographics, and motion graphics to combat extremist content. A few seconds and pass it on to specialized departments for further action.
Mr. President, أصحاب الجلالة والفخامة والسمو، اسمحوا لي ندعوكم إلى صورة جماعية جروب فوتو في هذا الموقع. شكرا لكم لاستماعكم.
Who attacked America on September the 11th? We used a method. We said, since we do not have the evidence which can be used in a court of law, let us look to see who has benefited. And when we use that method of analysis, we have come to the conclusion that the only beneficiary of the September 11 attack on America has been far and away the State of Israel. We said that those who attacked America, therefore, must have at their core the Israeli Mossad. And they must have benefit and help from many others within the United States, within the administration, even from within the White House. When we look at their strategy, we see that they put on board the aircraft a large number of Saudis. Sounds suspicious. Why so many Saudis? And these are not Saudis who are well known for their Islamic fervor, for being what they call militants. No, these are middle of the road, normal Saudis who drive BMWs. Huh? People who attended American universities, for example. They were on board the aircraft and they died when the aircraft crashed. So these were the hijackers, except that one of them read in the newspapers that he was dead. So he went to the Saudi government and he said to the Saudi government, "It seems to me as though I'm alive." The Saudi newspapers published this article, which I read with my own eyes. This particular student had studied in Minnesota, I think, in the early 1990s. And in 1995, perhaps, he had reported both to the local police and to the Saudi embassy in the United States that someone had broken into his apartment and stolen his passport. Whoever did that used that passport to hijack his identity, so they could put him on board the aircraft. And so the planning for September the 11th, 2001 started many, many years before. Why so many Saudis? It's suspicious. And why these middle-of-the-road Saudis? The answer is because Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, has a friendly relationship with the United States. In fact, there is something common between the state of Saudi Arabia and the state of Israel which would surprise you. They are sisters. The same forces who work for the establishment of the state of Israel are the same forces who work for the establishment of the state of Saudi Arabia. The same forces who have kept Israel alive today and guaranteed Israel's security are the same forces who have kept Saudi Arabia alive today and has guaranteed Saudi Arabia's security. And when the state of Israel is to be destroyed, Saudi Arabia also goes down into the garbage bin.
move on now. Concerns are growing among Muslims as Saudi authorities plan to destroy the birthplace of Prophet Muhammad in the holy city of Mecca. Reports say that under the plan, the historic site will be destroyed and replaced with a royal palace for King Abdullah for his visits to Mecca. The work is part of a multi-billion-dollar construction project in the holy city, which has already resulted in the destruction of hundreds of historic monuments. Saudi officials claim that the plan aims to expand Al-Masjid al-Haram, or the Grand Mosque, to host more pilgrims. Riyadh is under fire for mass destruction of historic buildings in Mecca. Some reports say up to 95% of Mecca's millennium-old buildings have been destroyed to be replaced with luxury hotels and shopping malls.
Saudi regime that professes to be a Muslim regime that professes to follow Islam is really doing all of these. I mean, if you look at Mecca, I remember Mecca maybe 20 years ago, and you look at it now, it's a world apart. They have turned Islam into a business, into something where they trade, and this actually is. It has a taste of what Islam was like prior to Islam being revealed to Prophet Muhammad in the days that we call Ayyam Jahiliyyah, or the times of ignorance, where all the time people used to come to a place, they used to buy and sell God. And the Saudi regime, which contrary to popular opinion is not a Muslim entity, it has no connection to Islam, even though it professes Islam, it has no connection to Islam. Its actions speak much louder than its words, and the many Qur'ans that it prints and all of this. It has no connection to Islam. This entity wants to turn Mecca and turn Masjid al-Haram, Masjid Nabawi, and Masjid Nabawi, of course, is another thing. They want to demolish that. This is something known. But when there was an uproar by the Muslims, they backed down and they started saying, oh, no, we didn't mean to do this. We didn't want to do this. This wasn't our plan. This is just some extremists who are saying this. And we should understand that all Muslims, Sunni, Shia, all Muslims are against this cancerous entity of what we could call Arab Zionism, which is referred to as the Saudi regime.
Shabir, if I could just come in here, I do apologize. We just have a minute left, so I wanted to ask, the Wahhabis say that sites such as the one that they're going to destroy have no place in Islam, and we've seen that play out in many places around the world, and we're seeing that play out now in Iraq and Syria as well, even with other religious sacred places as well, by these extremists. So is there any basis for that? Because you're an Islamic scholar, so I'm asking you that in that sense. Is there any basis for that in Islam, in fact?
No, not at all. Islamically, no one worships buildings. This is well known, and anyone who does, of course, this is insane. This is not the way. This is an extreme cult that is outside Islam, that professes Islam, much like ISIS, who is really the child of Saudi and Qatar. These people, they want to break anything that has any connection to culture, anything that has a connection to God, to spirituality, to culture, to history. Because, of course, history reminds them of what they have done. And history teaches people that all of these oppressors, all of these tyrants will have an end. And of course, Mr. Saud of Saudi Arabia, the Qatar, and all of these people, and the Bahraini person, they're all in the same pot. They're all the same thing, along with Netanyahu. There is no difference. People should understand that Netanyahu, the Zionist cancer, and the Saudi cancer are one and the same. There is no difference between these two. And that the Muslims, Sunni, Shia, all Muslims should come together against this cancer. Because this cancer is killing our people in Palestine, it's killing our people in Syria, in Iraq, in Saudi. Everywhere in the world, this cancer is killing. And at the head of this cancer is who? Everyone knows. We don't need to say over here who.
الإسلاميين نوعين. هناك نوع لديه قناعة كبيرة بالحرب على الأمريكيين والمشروع الأمريكي، وهذا النوع تشكله بعض حركات المقاومة إن كان في العراق. يعني لا يجوز أن نشمل الإسلاميين كل الإسلاميين، وهناك إسلاميين هم يعملون لمصلحة CIA، وهؤلاء الناس تحركهم السعودية وتمولهم السعودية. وأنت شاهدت ماذا حصل عندنا في لبنان، فتح الإسلام بالكامل فبركة سعودية، وواضح بأن فتح الإسلام كانت تنفذ مشروعا سعوديا في لبنان وفي مخيم نهر البارد، ولم تكن تنفذ مشروعا مقاوما. أنا أعتقد أن اليهود الذين كانوا في المدينة عادوا بعد 1400 سنة من هزيمتهم على يد النبي محمد، عادوا للانتقام من النبي محمد عبر هذا النظام الحاكم. أنا أجزم.
يعني تقول انه
فتشي عن بني
الاتصال السعودي
المسلمين يعرفوا هذا الامر. فتشي عن بني القينقاع بتوصلي شو عم بيصير اليوم مع النظام السعودي.
Officially, Saudi Arabia didn't disapprove of the deal, but it was worried that Iran, flush with new revenues, would intensify its activities across the Middle East. And Riyadh appears to have surprisingly forged closer ties with another country weary of Iran's intentions, Israel.
It was just 1 year ago. The West and Iran were signing a historic agreement on the Iranian nuclear program. In exchange for a lifting of sanctions, Tehran agreed to limit its nuclear activities and to an intrusive inspection regime.
I think this is a sign of hope for the entire world, and we all know that this is very much needed in these times.
While it was all smiles in Vienna, the deal felt like a cold shower for the fiercest opponents of Iran's return on the world stage, Israel and Saudi Arabia, pushing these two sworn enemies to engage each other in secret. A few weeks earlier, an unusual forum was held at the prestigious Council on Foreign Relations. Side by side, an Israeli and a Saudi, but not just anyone. The Israeli is Dori Gold, who is very close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Saudi is retired General Anwar Eshki, an advisor to the royal family. The timing for this meeting was no accident. At the same moment in Vienna, negotiations on Iran were about to bear fruit.
Today, our two states are facing the same set of security challenges. Our interests increasingly overlap. These security challenges that I'm speaking about primarily emanate from the same single source: the Islamic Republic of Iran.
This coming out in Washington was the result of 5 secret meetings between Israelis and Saudis in the Czech Republic, in Italy, and pictured here, in India. Gold and Eshki each run a think tank, a handy academic coverage to camouflage contacts between the two countries banned since the creation of Israel in 1948. And it was no coincidence either to see Eshki, a highly respected voice in Riyadh, interviewed by Israeli media, and in turn Gold, now director of Israel's foreign ministry, speaking to a Saudi newspaper. A few weeks ago, the Speaker of the Iranian parliament even told a Lebanese television channel that back in 2006, Riyadh and Jerusalem had cooperated during the war between Israel and Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia backed by Iran.
Not only Saudi Arabia did not help Hezbollah, but quite the opposite. It has helped the Zionist entity. According to our information, during the war in July 2006, Saudi Arabia even provided Israel with strategic intelligence.
A claim that the head of Israel's military intelligence at the time confirmed on France 24 for the very first time.
The fact that the Saudis were also supporting the fact that Hezbollah as a terror organization will be defeated is not a surprise.
According to our information, those contacts are continuing, this time at an official level. Earlier this year, the Israeli defense minister didn't even try to hide it.
But we do have channels to speak with our Sunni Arab neighboring countries, not just Jordan and Egypt,
Gulf states, North African states. As we share today, Israel and them, and we claim Europe and the United States, common interests. For them, Iran is an enemy. The Shia axis, to include Hezbollah, is an enemy.
In April, during a visit to Egypt by Saudi King Salman, Cairo announced the handover to Saudi Arabia of 2 small islands in the Red Sea. These islands are of strategic interest for Israel, as they control the access to the strait leading to the port town of Eilat, Israel's one and only access to the Red Sea. Here's the rub. Under the terms of the 1979 peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, such a transfer, in this case to Saudi Arabia, must be validated by Israel. And that is precisely what happened. Riyadh officially committed itself to respect freedom of navigation in the area for everyone, including Israel. Another player in those semi-official meetings is the former head of Saudi intelligence, Prince Turki al-Faisal. 2 months ago, he took the stage alongside Netanyahu's former national security advisor.
With regard to the two-state solution, the fact that every Western leader, left, right, doesn't matter, supports a so-called two-state solution should tell everybody around the world if this is beneficial to the Palestinians or not. The two-state solution is a disaster. It's worse than the original Nakba. Going back to the Saudi-Israeli relationship, there really is no demarcation between these two entities. They both serve the agenda of this farcical war on terror. The Saudis are the ones who are financing ISIS and Al-Qaeda before it. This is really more of a rebranding of Al-Qaeda, turned it into ISIS. The fact that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other Gulf states are supporting financially, literally funding this, is indisputable. The fact that Israel and Saudi Arabia work together tells you that ISIS more realistically stands for Israeli Secret Intelligence Services. The agenda of ISIS does nothing but exacerbate the already draconian laws that exist in the West. It is an intended agenda of taking more rights away from the people, instilling more power into these corrupt governments in the West, which are never-endingly falsifying information in order to justify one war, one boogeyman after another. So the Israeli-Saudi relationship could hardly be any more intimate. These two are in bed and have been in bed for a long time. Well, I think it's beyond absurd to think that the Saudi Arabian regime, the only nation in the world named after a family, by the way, the Saudi Arabian regime builds hospitals in Israel. It funds ISIS, which is the agenda, which is the instrument to maintain and continue the farcical war on terror. The Saudi Arabian regime could have been helping the Palestinians. Hell, they could be rebuilding Gaza. They could have been using their influence to open the border between Gaza and Egypt. And yet, the Saudi Arabian regime sits there doing nothing but funding this Wahhabi takfiri insanity, this false Islam throughout the region. Everything that's happening in the Middle East right now in terms of the bloodshed is a part of the Israeli agenda of Greater Israel. If we read Oded Yanan's A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s, we find that the agenda for Israel was target number 1, to take out Saddam Hussein, done, and also to balkanize, effectively balkanize the Middle East region. Saudi Arabia is literally paying for that balkanization policy. We see that playing out in Syria. It's all too clear. We see that agenda playing out in Iraq. Again, all too clear. Saudi Arabia pretends to be an Islamic regime while it sits there and destroys holy sites, including sites of the Prophet himself. It's doing this all the while pretending to be an Islamic nation. It is nothing but a stooge for the West. It is the instrument of finance for this madness we see in the region. So anything that the Saudi Arabian regime does and the Israeli regime does is not helpful to the Palestinians. The Palestinians have every right to decide for themselves, and I have every right to voice my opinion. I am an honorary Palestinian citizen, by the way, so I do reckon I have the right to express myself honestly. The fact that every single Western leader supports a two-state solution should tell you something. If you want to be in agreement with every single Western leader with regard to the so-called two-state solution, go ahead.
But how about the
Here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen if there is a so-called two-state solution. what you'll have is this powerful Israeli state sitting next to this disempowered, impotent, military non-existent. It won't have the rights to be able to exercise freedom of travel. It'll have an absolutely economically inferior state, and it will always be just one false flag attack away from being pummeled by Israel. And the Palestinians will never get their land back. They will never have the right of return if they sign on the dotted line and say they agree to a two-state deal. So I hope to God that they never make that choice. But of course it is their choice. I do not agree with either one of them on that subject, and I certainly don't agree with all of the Western leaders who agree with a two-state solution. I've just played out the scenario for you. If the Palestinians agree to a two-state so-called solution, you'll have a militarily, economically, politically impotent Palestinian state next to this behemoth of Israel, and it will be one false flag attack from being pummeled. Israel is the master of false flag attacks. It will use false flags to justify pummeling this Palestinian state if it's ever created. And never mind the refugees, the 1948 refugees. I want justice for all of them. I want all of the Palestinians to be able to return to Palestine proper. Palestine proper, not the two-state proper, not 1967. 1948 is the Palestine that I'm waiting for.
Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, has a friendly relationship with the United States. In fact, there is something common between the state of Saudi Arabia and the state of Israel which would surprise you. They are sisters. The same forces who work for the establishment of the state of Israel are the same forces who work for the establishment of the state of Saudi Arabia. The same forces who have kept Israel alive today and guaranteed Israel's security are the same forces who have kept Saudi Arabia alive today and has guaranteed Saudi Arabia's security. And when the state of Israel is to be destroyed, Saudi Arabia also goes down into the garbage bin.